Don't touch that contract. Section 73, C in the Arabic draft doesn't match the English version. The words sliced through the hum of the boardroom like glass. For a moment, nobody moved. The clock above the frosted window read 9:50 a.m., 10 minutes before the signing of a $1 billion deal that would reshape the skyline of New York City. Kesha Williams stood at the far end of the table, a bottle of disinfectant still in one hand, her blue cleaning gloves slightly wet. The men in dark suits looked up, their pens frozen mid-signature. David Harrison, senior partner of Harrison and Locke LLP, slowly raised his eyes from the document. "Excuse me?" he said. His voice carried both disbelief and the careful tone of a man used to power. "You said Section 73 what?" "C," Kesha repeated quietly. Her voice didn't tremble. "It's not the same as your English version." The marble floor reflected the white light from the ceiling. Outside, the city roared a sound that never reached this high-floor room, insulated by money and distance. Omar al-Rashid, the foreign investor whose fortune was being married to the firm's project, leaned back in his chair. His eyes were like oil, shiny, cold, impossible to read. "This woman cleans the floors, yes?" he said, half to his assistant. "And now she reads contracts?" The assistant laughed softly. Kesha didn't look at him. "I clean," she said evenly. "But I can read too." David placed his pen down, interlaced his fingers. "Miss Williams, this is a highly confidential document. How exactly do you know there's a discrepancy?" "Because," she said, choosing her words carefully, "the word used in Arabic Tamlik means transfer of ownership, not temporary partnership. Your translation says something else." The room exhaled all at once. Margaret Foster, a senior partner, chuckled uneasily. "This is ridiculous. Mr. Harrison, shall we proceed?" But something in Kesha's tone, an unshakable calm, the kind born from knowing you're right even when you shouldn't speak, made David hesitate. He turned to Omar. "Is that true?" Omar's smile didn't waver. "Mr. Harrison, this is nonsense. There's nothing." "Then you won't mind if we confirm it," David said quietly. Omar's nostrils flared. Kesha's pulse thundered in her ears, but her face stayed composed. She knew what she was doing might cost her job, maybe worse. Yet she remembered Amara's small voice last night at their kitchen table. "Mama, words are like doors. Some open to truth. Some hide it." The memory steadied her. She had opened a door. "Security," David said finally, turning to the corner of the room. Marcus, the ex-military guard, stepped forward, his canine dog at his side. "Bring up the independent translator on the screen." "Already on standby, sir," Marcus replied. Omar's assistant whispered something in Arabic, fast, urgent. The dog's ears twitched, catching the pitch. "You should not let staff interrupt international business," Omar snapped. "It's unprofessional." "And hiding false clauses is what, sir?" Kesha asked before she could stop herself. The silence that followed was so heavy it could have been cut with the letter opener gleaming on the desk. David's phone buzzed. The translator appeared on the wall monitor, his accent crisp, his eyes scanning the document. He frowned. "Yes, the lady is correct. The phrase in the Arabic version implies full transfer of control after 30 days, not 6 months as the English version states." Margaret's pen slipped from her fingers. "That can't be right." Omar's smile collapsed. "This is absurd. You hired incompetent translators. My version is accurate." "Then, explain the penalty clause," Kesha said softly. 200 million in liquidated damages if termination occurs before transfer. It's hidden in subtext. My daughter explained it to me. She studies Arabic at the community center. All heads turned toward her again. "Your daughter?" Carter sneered. "What is she?" 12. 12 and fluent, Kesha said. "She helps refugee families fill out forms when nobody else will." David leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Mr. Omar, were you planning to mention this penalty clause before we signed?" Omar's hand tightened around his Mont Blanc pen. "It's a misunderstanding." "Then let's clear it up," David said. "Marcus, please scan Mr. Omar's assistant's bag." The assistant began to protest, but the canine barked once, sharp, startling. Marcus pulled out a small external drive and a phone buzzing with messages. One unread text flashed across the screen. If they delay, activate Plan B. The translator's voice echoed faintly. There's more. Section 47B in Arabic law implies the property reverts to Mr. Al-Rashid's holding company automatically. David's face drained of color. Automatically? Yes, sir. Unless contested within 30 days, which your version doesn't mention. Omar slammed his palm on the table. You cannot take her word over mine, he shouted. His accent thickened under stress. She is a maid. She's also the only person in this room who just saved us $1 billion. David said coldly. The statement landed like a gavel. Margaret looked away. Carter swallowed hard. Kesha stood perfectly still. Sir, Marcus said quietly. The file on this drive contains recordings of internal meetings from your firm. What? David's jaw clenched. How did you? Because your partner, Mr. Carter, was feeding information to their side. Marcus finished. Carter's face turned chalk white. That's a lie. Is it? Kesha's voice was almost gentle. Because just now, when I mentioned Section 73, you were the only one who flinched. Omar's gaze darted to Carter. For a split second, truth gleamed like lightning. Then chaos erupted, voices overlapping, lawyers shouting, papers sliding. Through it all, Kesha didn't move. She felt oddly calm, as if watching a storm she'd predicted finally break. David raised his hand. Enough, he thundered. The room fell silent again. This meeting is suspended pending legal review. No signatures. No transfers. Omar opened his mouth, but David cut him off. And for the record, Miss Williams, thank you. The words hit harder than applause. Kesha blinked, unsure if she'd heard right. Sir? You did the right thing, he said simply. Most people wouldn't have. She nodded once, throat tight. I just saw something wrong. That's all. That's not all, he said. That's courage. Omar gathered his papers with shaking hands. His assistant whispered, We'll fix this. But his voice lacked conviction. The K9 dog growled softly, as if sensing the fear. Kesha turned to leave, her gloves damp against her palms. She passed the glass wall, where her reflection looked both small and unbreakable. For a moment, she thought of Amara again, the little girl sitting at their chipped kitchen table, saying, Mama, one day people will listen. Maybe that day had come. Outside the boardroom, the hallway lights glowed warmer, softer. The world hadn't changed, but something inside her had. She inhaled deeply, the scent of polish and truth mingling in the air. Behind her, voices rose again, the machine of corporate justice grinding into motion. She didn't need to stay for that. She had done her part. As she pressed the elevator button, her hands still trembling, she whispered to herself, half prayer, half promise. Justice isn't loud, it's the whisper that refuses to die. The doors slid open, and she stepped inside, leaving the billion-dollar storm behind. The elevator doors closed, and the world above faded into a dull hum. Kesha leaned against the mirrored wall, her reflection staring back at her uniform wrinkled, eyes still sharp. Her pulse finally began to slow, the adrenaline fading into something heavier, quieter. She couldn't believe what she'd just done. One sentence, one choice, and everything might change. The numbers ticked downward, 42, 41, 40. Each floor bringing her closer to the life she knew, the smell of bleach. The steady rhythm of survival. When the elevator stopped at the lobby, she stepped out into the smell of polished granite and coffee. Marcus, the security guard, was waiting near the front desk. Miss Williams, he called, catching up to her. You okay? She nodded. I think so. Not sure how long that'll last. He gave a small grin. That took guts. Most people would have kept quiet. Maybe I should have, she said softly. That kind of room doesn't forgive mistakes. Marcus tilted his head. Sometimes it doesn't forgive silence either. He reached down, patting the K9's head. If you need anything, I'm around. She smiled faintly and pushed through the revolving door into the gray chill of late autumn. The street noise felt louder than usual, car horns, voices, life moving too fast. She tightened her jacket, the cheap fabric, no match for the wind. The subway station waited a block away, the scent of roasted nuts and diesel filling the air. She didn't notice how her hands were trembling until she reached into her pocket for her MetroCard. Inside her phone buzzed one missed call from baby girl. She exhaled and called back. "Mama? You didn't answer." Amara's small voice came through. "Are you still at work?" "I'm on my way home now," Kesha said, trying to sound steady. "You okay, honey?" "Yeah. Did you tell them about the word?" Kesha froze. The sound of a train roared in the tunnel below. "I did," she said quietly. "And they listened?" "They didn't have a choice." "Are you in trouble?" "Maybe," she admitted. "But it's the right kind of trouble." There was a pause, and then Amara said, "Mama, you always tell me to use my words. You did the same thing." Kesha smiled, the corners of her eyes damp. "Yeah, I guess I did." The subway arrived, brakes screeching. She slipped inside, finding a corner seat among tired faces and winter coats. She looked around, the teacher grading papers, the delivery driver half asleep, the old woman clutching groceries, and she felt a quiet connection. People like her, all trying to hold on to something decent, in a world that rarely noticed. The train rattled through the tunnel, flickering light across her reflection in the window. She thought back to when she first started cleaning at Harrison and Locke, how proud she'd been just to have steady work. Her mother had cleaned hospitals. Her grandmother, white folks' houses down south. Each generation bent but never broke. Maybe this was just her chapter in that same long fight for dignity. When she reached their stop in Brooklyn, the air was colder, sharper. The sky was bruised purple with the promise of rain. She walked the 3 blocks home, boots scraping against cracked pavement, until she reached their small brick apartment. The hallway smelled faintly of onions and detergent. She unlocked the door, and warmth hit her, the glow of their tiny lamp, the sound of a jazz station playing low on the radio. Amara sat at the kitchen table, a notebook open, her hair tied in a messy bun. "Hey Mama," she said, looking up. "You look different." "Do I?" "Yeah. Like you did something important." Kesha laughed softly. "Maybe I did. Or maybe I just stopped being scared." She hung her jacket and sat across from her daughter. The table was cluttered with papers written in looping Arabic script. "You still studying?" "Always," Amara said. "The news said that guy Omar is famous. He donates to charities." "Donations don't wash away lies," Kesha replied. "You remember that?" Amara nodded. "Did you really stop the deal?" "Not by myself. But I spoke up. And that was enough to make them look closer." Amara tilted her head. "What if they get mad at you?" "They will," Kesha said, smiling gently. "But that's all right. Truth don't make friends easy." For a while, they sat in silence, the radio filling the room. The warmth of the heater clashed with the chill still clinging to Kesha's clothes. She felt every muscle ache from tension. She stood and poured 2 mugs of cocoa from the pot she'd left on the stove that morning. The smell of chocolate drifted between them. "Here," she said. "You earned this too." Amara took the cup, her small fingers wrapping around it. "Mama?" "Yeah? Do you ever wish you had a different job?" Kesha looked down at her own hands, calloused, cracked from years of cleaning chemicals. "Sometimes. But tonight I'm glad for it. Being invisible has its advantages. People show their real faces when they think you don't matter. And now they know you do," Amara said. Kesha smiled again, proud and sad all at once. Later, after Amara had gone to bed, she sat by the window watching the city lights blink through the fog. Below, sirens echoed, and a man was shouting at a taxi. Life kept spinning, as if billion-dollar betrayals and small acts of courage were just pebbles dropped into an endless river. She opened her phone and scrolled through the day's messages. There was one she didn't expect from David Harrison himself. It was brief. "Thank you, you did the right thing. We'll talk tomorrow." Her heart skipped. No threats, no anger. Just acknowledgement. She read it twice, unsure if she should reply. She finally typed, "You're welcome, sir." Then she put the phone down and stared out into the night. The rain began to fall, tapping softly against the windowpane. Each drop felt like punctuation at the end of a long sentence. Her thoughts drifted to her mother, who used to tell her stories about the old days, marches, sit-ins, people standing tall even when nobody noticed. Courage, her mother once said, Ain't loud. It's just steady. That steadiness, Kesha realized, had carried her here. The next morning came too soon. The alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m. Same as always. Her body ached. But she rose anyway. Old habits survived everything. She packed Amara's lunch, fried eggs, and made toast while the radio murmured news about a potential corporate fraud case under review. She didn't need to guess which one. When Amara came out in her school uniform, Kesha kissed her forehead. Be good today. Always, Amara said. You too. Kesha smiled. I'll try. She stepped out into the chill again, the sky pale with the first stretch of dawn. On the subway, people read newspapers, their faces blank. A headline caught her eye. $1 billion deal suspended pending investigation. She felt her stomach twist. The photo beneath showed David Harrison shaking hands with Omar at some gala weeks earlier. She wondered if he'd already started regretting her interruption. At the office, things were different. Whispers followed her down the hall. People glanced, then looked away. Some smiled faintly, others scowled. When she reached the janitor's closet, her cleaning cart was gone. A folded note sat on the shelf. See HR before your shift. She swallowed hard. The buzz of fluorescent lights filled the silence. Was this the cost? She walked to HR, each step heavier than the last. Inside, the receptionist looked up nervously. Miss Williams, Mr. Harrison asked to see you in his office. Her stomach dropped. Now? Yes, ma'am. She followed the elevator's quiet hum again, the same one that had carried her down yesterday. But this time, her fear was mixed with something new, a fragile hope. Whatever waited upstairs. She had already crossed the point of no return. She stood taller as the doors opened. The marble floor gleaming under the morning Sunday. She took a deep breath and stepped toward the office that might end or redefine her life. When Kesha reached the top floor again, the air felt heavier, quieter than she remembered. The same glass walls that had once made her invisible now reflected her face back at her, clear and sharp in the morning light. She could hear muffled voices behind closed doors, urgent, clipped, anxious. She straightened her uniform, pressed the wrinkles flat, and knocked on David Harrison's office door. Come in, he said. His voice sounded different, tired, but not angry. He was standing by the window overlooking downtown Manhattan, coffee in hand. The skyline stretching gray and silver beyond him. Miss Williams, he said, turning to face her. Please, sit. She hesitated before lowering herself into a chair that probably cost more than her month's rent. You wanted to see me, sir? Yes. He set the coffee down, folded his arms, and studied her for a long moment. You understand what happened yesterday has caused quite a situation. I figured, she said quietly. If I crossed a line, I understand. You crossed the right line, he replied, surprising her. The board called an emergency session last night. That deal was a trap. You saved us from a disaster. Kesha blinked. Sir, I didn't mean to. You meant to do what was right, he interrupted. That's rare around here. His tone softened. But I have to ask, how did you even notice that clause? My daughter, she said simply. She's learning Arabic. She helps refugees fill out forms at the community center. She told me about that word Tamlik. I recognized it. David smiled faintly. Smart kid. Too smart for her own good sometimes, Kesha said with a small laugh. She makes me learn too. Says knowledge shouldn't stay in one house. Wise girl, he murmured. Then his expression darkened. Mr. Carter confessed this morning. He was feeding information to Omar's team for months. They promised him a partnership in Dubai. The FBI's already involved. Kesha stared at him. The same man who called me unprofessional? The same. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. This company's supposed to represent integrity. But sometimes we forget what that means. You reminded us. She didn't know what to say, so she stayed quiet. He walked behind his desk, opening a drawer. There's something else. The board voted to suspend Carter and remove Omar's firm from all negotiations. We'll need to rebuild the deal from scratch. And we're setting up an internal ethics review process, something we should have done years ago. He slid a folder toward her. Inside was a printed letter. This is for you. Kesha read the header: Temporary Consultant. Community Integrity Liaison. Sir, I don't understand. You're good at seeing what others overlook. We'd like you to work with our compliance team for a few months reviewing documents, advising on cultural or translation issues. But I'm not a lawyer, she said, stunned. No? He said. You're something rarer. You're honest. Her throat tightened. Sir, I don't know what to say. Say yes, he said simply. And take a day off before you start. You've earned it. She stood, clutching the folder to her chest. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me, he said, a half-smile forming. Thank your daughter. As she left the office, the whispers followed her again, but this time they sounded different. Not mockery. Curiosity. Respect, maybe. She didn't look back. In the elevator, she exhaled a shaky breath and pressed her hand against her heart. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Amara. How did it go? Kesha typed back with trembling fingers. We're gonna be okay, baby. That evening, the city seemed to glow softer. The news was everywhere: corporate fraud exposed, before $1B deal signing. Reporters camped outside Harrison and Locke's building, lights flashing against glass. Kesha kept her head down, slipping through the side entrance, but she caught her reflection on one of the monitors in the lobby. Her image was small, background blur in a story bigger than herself. But she smiled anyway. Sometimes heroes weren't the ones on camera. Sometimes they were the ones mopping the floor beneath it. She reached home after dark. Amara was waiting at the door, eyes wide, excitement vibrating through her small frame. Mama. You're on TV. Oh Lord. Kesha muttered. I hope not. They didn't show your face, but they said a female staff member saved $1 billion. That's you. Kesha laughed softly, kicking off her shoes. Let's just say I stopped a bad thing from happening. That's what heroes do, Amara said proudly. Heroes clean up messes. Then I've been one for years, Kesha teased. They both laughed. Over dinner, simple chicken and rice, they talked about everything except fear. Amara asked questions about David. About the meeting. About what happened next. Kesha didn't have all the answers. But she told her daughter something true. Every choice costs something. But silence costs the most. After dinner, Amara pulled out her school project. A report on people who make a difference. I was gonna write about Rosa Parks, she said, but now I think I'll write about you. Kesha froze, spoon halfway to her mouth. Me? Baby. Rosa Parks changed history. So did you? Amara said. You just did it in a boardroom. Kesha couldn't speak for a long moment. Finally, she said, all right then. But make sure you spell my name right. They both giggled. Later that night, when Amara was asleep, Kesha stood by the window again, looking at the distant lights of Manhattan. Somewhere in those towers, rich men were scrambling to fix what she'd broken open. She didn't feel guilty. For the first time in years, she felt seen. Her phone buzzed again, a new message, this time from Marcus. FBI asked for your statement tomorrow morning. Don't worry, it's just procedure. Proud of you, Miss Williams. She smiled and set the phone aside. The city hummed outside, restless and alive. The next morning, Kesha dressed differently. She ironed her blouse, tied her hair neatly, and wore the small silver cross her mother had given her before she passed. When she arrived at the building, reporters swarmed the front entrance, their voices rising in a frenzy. Marcus met her inside, guiding her past the noise. Whole country's talking about it, he said. You started something big. I just told the truth, she said. Truth's bigger than you think. In the conference room, 2 FBI agents waited. They were polite, professional. They asked her to describe what she'd seen, what she'd heard, how she'd known something was wrong. She answered carefully, honestly. When they were done, one of them, an older black woman with gray at her temples, smiled. You remind me of my mother, she said softly. She used to say, courage and common sense, use both, or you'll get in trouble. Looks like you did. When Kesha left the building again, she saw a small crowd gathered near the steps, employees from the maintenance crew, cafeteria workers, receptionists. They clapped as she passed. Someone handed her a small card. On it was written, "Thank you for reminding them we exist." Her eyes blurred with tears. For the first time, she realized what her voice had done. It hadn't just saved a company. It had cracked something open. That night, when she returned home, she found a note taped to their apartment door. It was from a neighbor she barely knew. "Your courage made my daughter believe she could be something. God bless you." Kesha pressed the note to her chest, her heart swelling with something between disbelief and gratitude. Maybe this was how change started, not with speeches or banners, but with one woman too tired to stay quiet any longer. And as she turned off the lights, she whispered to the dark, "Let them see us now." The morning the hearing took place, the air outside the courthouse was thin and cold. The kind that burned the lungs and cleared the mind. Kesha stood on the marble steps beside Marcus. Both of them watching reporters swarm like crows around the doors. "You don't have to go in there," Marcus said quietly. "You already did your part." "Yes, I do," she replied. "If they're going to speak my name, I'd rather be there to hear how they use it." Her gloved hands tightened around her purse strap. Inside was a folded photo of Amara, smiling in her school uniform, reminding her why she was standing here at all. The FBI hearing wasn't a trial yet, just an inquiry. A public review of the evidence before indictments. But for the people watching, it might as well have been Judgment Day. Omar al-Rashid arrived first, flanked by lawyers in dark coats. Cameras flashed, questions flew. "Mr. al-Rashid, did you intentionally falsify documents? Were you aware of the penalty clause?" He ignored them, head held high, his face smooth with arrogance. Behind him, Carter followed, his complexion gray, his once expensive suit hanging loose as if it had given up. When they passed Kesha on the steps, Omar glanced at her, his lips curling slightly, not in anger, but something worse, amusement. "The maid returns," he murmured. She met his eyes and said quietly, "The truth always cleans up." Inside, the room smelled of old paper and tension. Lawyers whispered, cameras clicked. And a dozen officials sat behind polished desks. David Harrison entered last, nodding once to Kesha before taking his place at the witness table. The moderator spoke, voice steady. "This hearing concerns the alleged fraudulent contract between Harrison and Locke LLP and the Al-Rashid Investment Group. We will review the role of internal staff who identified discrepancies." They called David first. He testified clearly, methodically, explaining how Omar's team had manipulated the Arabic version of the contract. When they asked how the issue was discovered, he paused and looked toward Kesha. "One of our staff members noticed it," he said. "Her name is Kesha Williams. She's here today." All eyes turned. Kesha wished for a moment she could disappear, but she stood, chin high. "Miss Williams," the moderator said, "we understand you are not trained in legal work. Can you explain how you recognized the problem?" "I can try," she said, her voice steady. "I don't know much about contracts. But I know words. My daughter studies Arabic. I saw a word that didn't fit. I just asked a question. And that question stopped the signing of $1 billion deal," the moderator said. "Yes, sir," she replied softly. "But it wasn't the $1 billion that bothered me. It was the lie." A murmur rippled through the room. Omar shifted, his lawyer whispering frantically in his ear. The agents played a short audio clip. Omar's voice, low and confident, saying, 30 days, complete transfer. Americans too foolish to notice. The sound filled the chamber. When it ended, there was silence so deep it rang. Omar's mask cracked. "Those recordings were taken illegally," he protested. "They mean nothing," the agent replied coolly. "They were retrieved from your assistant's company device. That makes them evidence." Carter buried his face in his hands. The moderator cleared his throat. "Miss Williams, you may step down. Thank you for your integrity." She nodded and returned to her seat beside Marcus. Her knees trembled slightly. Marcus leaned over and whispered, "You just ended his empire." "I didn't end it," she said. "He did." Hours later, the hearing adjourned. The headlines hit within minutes. Omar al-Rashid faces federal investigation, insider confirms fraud. As the crowd spilled outside, Kesha stood apart from the noise, watching Omar's car disappear down the street under police escort. David joined her a few minutes later, his expression a mix of relief and fatigue. You did good in there, he said. It's not over yet, she reminded him. No, he said. But we're closer. He hesitated, then added. You know, when this is all done, I'd like you to stay on with the firm officially. Full time. We could use someone who sees what others miss. Kesha smiled faintly. You sure your partners will like that? They'll get over it. He offered his hand, and she shook it. His palm was warm, steady. You ever wonder why I didn't stop Carter sooner? He asked quietly. Because you trusted him, she said. That's not a sin, Mr. Harrison. It's just what good people do. He nodded. Still feels like blindness. Sometimes trust is just another kind of courage, she said. The kind that hurts when it breaks. He looked at her for a moment longer, then smiled an honest one this time. Take care, Miss Williams. When she got home that night, Amara was waiting with 2 bowls of soup and a wide grin. Mama. I saw the hearing on TV. You looked like you were in a movie. A scary one, Kesha said, hanging up her coat. But it's over now. Amara handed her a paper folded neatly in half. I wrote this for English class. It's called The Voice That Changed the Room. Kesha unfolded it slowly. The essay was short, written in Amara's careful cursive. Sometimes courage sounds like yelling. Sometimes it sounds like silence. But the bravest sound of all is a voice that doesn't belong in the room saying, wait. That's wrong. My mother taught me that. Kesha's eyes blurred as she finished reading. You make me proud, baby. You make me brave, Amara replied. Later that night, after Amara had gone to bed, Kesha sat at the kitchen table, the lamp casting a soft gold circle of light. She replayed the day in her mind, the questions, the faces, the disbelief turned to respect. For years, she had felt invisible. Yet today the truth had made her impossible to ignore. She opened her phone. There was a new email from David. The board approved the creation of the Community Integrity Program. Your position as director becomes permanent next month. Welcome aboard. Beneath it, one line written by hand in scanned ink. Justice may be quiet, but it remembers who spoke first. She exhaled, smiling through her tears. For a long time she sat there, letting the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sirens fill the silence. The city outside didn't change, but something deep within her did. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just surviving, she was shaping something. The next morning, she walked to the community center where Amara volunteered. Children sat at small tables, learning words in English and Arabic. Laughter echoing against the walls. When they saw her, one boy pointed. That's her. The lady from the news. Kesha laughed, embarrassed. Just someone who asked a question, she said. The teacher smiled. That's how all change begins. Kesha watched Amara helping a young girl pronounce English vowels. Her heart swelled. Maybe one day, these children wouldn't have to fight to be heard. Maybe her small act would ripple out further than she could see. As she left the center, sunlight broke through the clouds. The air smelled of rain and new beginnings. She looked up at the city skyline. Towers of glass that once made her feel small now gleamed like promises. Under her breath, she whispered the words that had carried her this far. Truth may not make you rich, but it'll set you free. Then she turned and walked home, her footsteps steady, the whisper of justice trailing behind her like a hymn. The weeks that followed the hearing unfolded like slow rain, steady and cleansing. Harrison and Locke had changed. The marble hallways that once echoed with polite indifference now buzzed with something new: awareness. New faces joined the firm's ethics team, and old ones kept their heads down, relearning humility. And at the center of it all, quietly, Kesha Williams began her first week as Director of Community Integrity. Her office wasn't large, just a small room overlooking a narrow street lined with food carts and office workers. On her desk sat a pot of fake tulips and a new nameplate, Kesha Williams, Community Integrity Liaison. She smiled every time she looked at it, though part of her still expected someone to walk in and say there'd been a mistake. On her first day, David stopped by. How's the view from the top? He teased. It's closer to the ground than you think, she replied. That's where I like it. He handed her a folder. The board approved the housing project you saved. We're renaming it Williams Square. The papers go public next week. Kesha blinked. "Sir, you can't name that after me." "It's already done," he said simply. "Consider it a thank you." "That's too much." "No," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "It's just enough." After he left, she sat back in her chair, overwhelmed. The project that had nearly been stolen by greed would now provide affordable homes for hundreds of families and bear her name. For someone who'd spent a lifetime being invisible, it was almost too much light. By noon, she met with her small team: 3 analysts, 2 interns, and Marcus, who'd officially transferred from security to compliance. "Don't worry," he said, grinning. "I still bring the dog, truth-sniffing duties." The others laughed. Kesha smiled. "We're not here to catch people," she said. "We're here to remind them why honesty matters." It became her mantra, spoken softly before every meeting, every review. Still, not everyone at the firm was happy. In the elevators, whispers trailed her name. Some called her the janitor who got lucky. Others avoided eye contact altogether. But she didn't flinch. Every time she felt doubt creeping in, she remembered the night she'd stood alone in that glass room, voice shaking but sure, saying, "Don't touch that contract." That voice, her own, had become her anchor. One afternoon, she found herself alone in the break room, brewing a cup of coffee when Margaret Foster walked in. The senior partner paused, clearly unsure how to begin. "Miss Williams," she said finally, "I owe you an apology." Kesha turned. "For what?" "For not believing you," Margaret said, her tone quiet but sincere. "For thinking someone like you couldn't be right." Kesha studied her for a moment, then said, "We all see what we expect to see. I don't hold it against you." "Still," Margaret said, "you deserved better." She hesitated, then added, "The firm is hosting a charity gala next week for the new housing project. You'll be our guest of honor." Kesha nearly laughed. "I don't own a dress fancy enough for that." "Then we'll fix that," Margaret said, smiling. "And Miss Williams, thank you for everything." The day of the gala arrived faster than she expected. Amara insisted on helping her get ready, fussing over her hair and adjusting the navy blue dress David's assistant had helped her pick. "You look like a movie star," Amara said, grinning. "I look like someone who borrowed too much confidence," Kesha muttered. "That's the best kind," her daughter replied. The gala was held at a grand hall in Midtown, chandeliers glittering like constellations above polished marble. For the first time, Kesha walked through those doors not as staff, but as guest. Conversations paused when she entered. Then, slowly, applause spread through the room. David met her near the stage. "You ready for a little attention?" "Not really," she said. "Good," he smiled. "That means you'll handle it right." Later, as the evening reached its height, David took the podium. "Tonight," he said, "we celebrate more than a project. We celebrate courage, the kind that doesn't wear a title or a suit." He gestured toward Kesha. "This woman reminded us what integrity looks like." The applause was thunderous. Kesha felt her cheeks burn. When David stepped aside, she walked up to the microphone, her heart pounding. For a second, she saw herself reflected in 1,000 eyes. Then she spoke. "I never thought I'd stand in a room like this," she began. "I used to clean rooms like this. I thought my job was to make sure nobody saw the mess. Turns out, sometimes you have to show people where it is before you can clean it up." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "When I stopped that contract, I wasn't thinking about money or headlines. I was thinking about my daughter and the kind of world she deserves. A world where truth matters, even when it's whispered by someone who's supposed to stay quiet." She paused, her voice soft but strong. "My mama used to say, 'Justice don't shout, it stands its ground.' I guess that's what I did. And I hope tonight reminds you all, no matter your title, your color, or your paycheck, doing right never goes out of style." The room rose to its feet. Some clapped, others wiped their eyes. In that sea of applause, Kesha spotted Marcus grinning like a proud brother, and Margaret nodding through tears. After the speeches, reporters swarmed for quotes, but she kept her answers simple. "I'm no hero," she said. "I just told the truth." Later, as the crowd thinned and music softened, David approached her with 2 glasses of sparkling cider. "You know," he said, handing her one, "you've changed this place." "Maybe," she said. Or maybe it was ready to change. He nodded. Either way, you reminded us who we are. They toasted silently, their reflections shimmering in the glass windows overlooking the city lights. As the night wore on, Kesha found herself standing alone on the balcony. The city spread below like a living heartbeat. She thought about the long road behind her, the nights she'd mopped these kinds of floors. Invisible and unheard. Now, she was part of something bigger. But more than pride, she felt peace. A quiet satisfaction that the story wasn't just hers anymore, it belonged to everyone who'd ever been overlooked. Back home, long after midnight, she tiptoed into Amara's room. Her daughter was asleep, a notebook open beside her pillow. On the page was a sketch of a building labeled Williams Square, with tiny figures, families smiling under warm windows. Kesha smiled, kissed her daughter's forehead, and whispered, "We did it, baby. We really did." She turned off the lamp and stood by the window, looking out at the faint glow of the skyline. The city was still awake, still hungry, still flawed. But for the first time, she believed it could be better. She whispered into the quiet, maybe justice isn't a word in a book. Maybe it's just a person doing the right thing when no one's watching. And with that thought, she closed her eyes. The weight of $1 billion truth finally lifting from her shoulders. The first snow of the season fell 2 weeks after the gala, quiet and clean, softening the city's hard edges. From her small office window, Kesha watched the flakes drift between skyscrapers, melting on the hot glass before they could settle. She loved that view. The city looked gentler from here, as if forgiveness had dusted it overnight. On her desk sat a thick stack of new proposals for community projects. Her department had grown, and for the first time, her days were filled with decisions instead of mop buckets. Yet even with her new title and a steady paycheck, she still packed her own lunch, still took the subway, still stopped to talk to the janitors who worked the night shift. She knew better than anyone that titles didn't change who you were. They just tested whether you remembered. That afternoon, Marcus knocked on her door. "Got a visitor," he said. "Someone you'll want to see." He stepped aside, and a tall, slender woman walked in, wrapped in a long beige coat. It took Kesha a moment, then she smiled. "Miss Foster. Please, come in." Margaret's hair had more silver than before, but her eyes were clear, almost peaceful. "I didn't want to bother you," she said, "but I wanted to give you something." She handed Kesha a thin envelope. Inside was a handwritten note and a check. "It's for the Community Integrity Scholarship," Margaret said. "I retired last week. Figured I'd invest in something cleaner than law." Kesha looked up. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "You didn't have to." "Maybe not," Margaret replied. "But I wanted to leave on the right side of history." They both laughed softly, the kind of laughter that comes after wounds have already healed. After she left, Kesha sat for a while, turning the envelope over in her hands. She thought about all the quiet ways people change, sometimes loudly, sometimes in silence, sometimes only after seeing someone else stand first. That evening, she took the long train home. The subway was nearly empty. The kind of calm only winter nights could bring. She watched her reflection in the dark window, layered over the blur of tunnels. The woman looking back at her seemed older, wiser. Not because of years, but because of truth. When she reached their stop, the cold bit at her cheeks. The small diner on the corner was still open, its windows fogged, the smell of grilled onions drifting out. She bought 2 slices of pie and carried them home, thinking of Amara waiting upstairs. Her daughter was at the table, surrounded by papers and textbooks. "College applications?" Kesha asked. "Trying to get ahead," Amara said, grinning. "Can you imagine? Me in college." "I can imagine it easy," Kesha said, placing the pie in front of her. "I imagined it the first day you learned your letters." Amara rolled her eyes affectionately. "You always say that." "Because it's true." They ate together. The room warm with lamplight and cinnamon. "Mama," Amara said after a while. "They invited me to speak at school next week. They want me to talk about what you did." "What I did?" "Yeah. How you changed things. They called it the power of one voice." Kesha laughed softly. "Lord, they make it sound bigger than it was." "It was big," Amara said firmly. "It changed people." Kesha didn't argue. Instead, she reached over and took her daughter's hand. Then tell them this, baby. One voice don't change the world, it just reminds the world it can still change. The next day, she returned to the office early. The city was wrapped in snow, but she didn't mind. The building lobby shimmered with Christmas lights. Someone from maintenance nodded at her as she passed, and she smiled back. They were her people. Upstairs, she found David waiting by her door. "Morning," he said. "You've been avoiding the news?" "I try to," she said. "Why?" "Because Omar al-Rashid pleaded guilty this morning," he said. "He's taking a deal." The assistant flipped on him. Kesha blinked. "It's over, then." "It's over," David said. "He'll serve time. Carter's cooperating too." "Good," she said quietly. "I don't hate them, you know. I just hope they learn something." "You always did take the high road," David said, smiling. "Someone has to." He hesitated, then said, "There's something else. We're holding a small ceremony at the new housing site this weekend. The first families move in next month. You should be there." "I wouldn't miss it," she said. When Saturday came, the city was bathed in pale sunlight. The lot where steel and greed had once collided was now alive with color, new buildings painted warm shades of yellow and blue, kids chasing each other across the courtyard. A banner stretched above the entrance. Williams Square. A place to begin again. Kesha stood before it, almost unable to breathe. Reporters took photos, but she barely noticed them. She was watching the families, the mother holding her baby close, the older man sitting on the bench smiling like he'd found home after years of wandering. David stepped up beside her. "You gave them this," he said. "No," she said softly. "They gave it to themselves. I just moved the dirt." When the speeches began, David spoke first, thanking donors and partners. Then he called her name. The crowd applauded as she approached the small podium. She took a moment, looking at all the faces, workers, children, neighbors, even a few of her old janitorial crew standing at the back, clapping proudly. "I don't have fancy words," she began. "All I ever wanted was to see fairness. Not the kind that wears suits or carries gavels, but the kind that remembers people." She paused, the winter air turning her breath to mist. "I used to think justice was something someone else handed out. But now I know it's something we build together, brick by brick. Truth by truth. And it starts with believing that even the smallest voice matters." The audience grew quiet, listening. Somewhere near the front, Amara wiped a tear from her cheek. "This place," Kesha continued, gesturing toward the new buildings, "isn't named for me. It's named for everyone who's ever been overlooked and decided to speak anyway." She smiled. "And if that's what my name stands for, then I'll wear it proud." When she finished, the crowd erupted into applause. The mayor shook her hand, reporters leaned in for quotes, but all she cared about was the sound of children laughing as they ran past her into their new homes. Later that night, after the ceremony, she and Amara walked through the courtyard alone. Snow crunched under their boots. Warm light spilled from the windows. And for the first time, Kesha truly believed in second chances, not just for her, but for everyone who'd ever been told they didn't belong. "Mama," Amara said softly, "do you ever miss cleaning?" Kesha smiled. "Sometimes. It was honest work. And truth be told, I still clean every day." "You do?" "Sure. Just different messes now." They both laughed. As they reached the gate, Kesha stopped and turned to look one last time. The buildings stood quiet and proud against the night sky, their windows glowing like 1,000 tiny candles. She took a slow breath and whispered the words that had carried her from a mop to a microphone. "Justice doesn't shout, it stands its ground." Amara slipped her arm through her mother's, and together they walked home, leaving footprints in the snow that glittered under the streetlights, proof, small but unshakable, that the truth had passed this way.